This is Joe Carpenter. Today is June 17th, 2021, and I'm interviewing Kevin Smith for the first time. This interview is taking place at University Hall at the University of Texas at Arlington. This interview is sponsored by the College of Liberal Arts and is part of the Maverick Veterans Voices Project. Thank you for being here, and thank you for agreeing to interview.
Pleased to be of service.
Where are you from originally, and what can you tell me about your growing up?
Joe, I was born about 20 miles north of Fenway Park outside of Boston.
Really?
A fairly large family. We lived in a tidewater town of maybe 15,000 people. High school, I went to a boys prep school, St. Mary's Boys High School in Lynn, Massachusetts for a couple of years. And then I graduated from Saugus High School, Saugus, Massachusetts, 1963.
So were you involved in ROTC in high school?
Joe, as far as I know, there was no ROTC. I'm not really sure. We had a small high school. I think my graduating class was like 100 people.
Did you have any family members who were in the military?
Of my four brothers, 3 of them served.
I see.
Only the youngest avoided it. I had a brother that served in, they're all Army people. My brother served in Trieste, Italy during the Cold War.
Wow.
My older brother was drafted, as was I.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an MP. He never left the country. He did a lot of time in Needles, California.
Oh,
really close to Death Valley.
Oh my!
So he had a few stories to tell.
I bet he did. I bet it was hot there like it is here.
Oh yeah.
How did you become interested in the military? I guess you kind of already answered that question.
My interest peaked when I was 1A on my draft card. Then that really got my interest, if you want to know.
Sure.
When I graduated from college in Chicago at Loyola University, I had a job, but I also was looking for deferments. So I got my teacher's certification in Illinois. But of course, that was not enough to defer you.
I see.
In the long run.
And what year was that again?
I graduated in 1968.
Okay.
And I was certified shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I was working, and I worked my way through college. So, in a family business outside of Chicago.
So you had a bachelor's degree at this time?
Oh yeah. I was drafted after I graduated.
And drafted as an enlisted guy?
Yeah, I was. It wasn't unusual, Joe. There were, I was qualified to be drafted, and I had my student deferment.
Right.
In those days, you had to carry your draft card around with you. That was part of the regimen, and the draft was a huge thing for college students in those days. A huge sword scimitar over your head.
Right.
So.
But as a college graduate, what I was getting at was, as a college graduate, could you not have gone to OCS and been an officer?
I was constantly advised of that after I was drafted. When I reported to, I took the Northwestern to the Van Buren Street Induction Center in Chicago, and they offered it to me there, and I said, I'll think about it. They offered it to me after I was sent to Fort Campbell from Chicago. I was sent to Fort Campbell, which is the home of the 101st Airborne, and I considered that then, and I asked if I could make my decision at a later date. And when I finally refused, OCS, they offered me the training for chaplain's assistant.
I see.
So I think that must have something to do with your education.
Okay. All right. Why did you choose not to do that?
Uh, a draftee was a 2-year hitch. And at that time, I think I would have had committed to 4 years.
I see. That makes sense.
And I had things to do.
Right. Life was waiting for you.
Yeah.
So what is your affiliation with the University of Texas at Arlington?
Personally, I've done some coursework at UTA. I studied archivy under Gerald Saxon in his certificate program.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that was preparation for the ACA examinations, which means the Academy of Certified Archivists.
Right.
And when I was doing that work, I was employed by the National Archives and Records Administration, and that was appertained to what I was doing there. So,
I see. Okay. So we'll come back to that after we've talk a little bit more about that after we've talked about your military career a little bit.
Other affiliations with UTA.
Mm-hmm.
I did some coursework with Alan Sachs.
Oh.
And Jerry Rodnitsky,
mm-hmm.
who just recently passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And they were impressive people.
Right. Yeah, very.
Yeah.
Certainly, Alan Sachs is a celebrity, isn't he?
One of the, if you want to confuse somebody walking around the campus here, ask them to meet you at the Alan Sachs Memorial.
Oh. Is there one?
There are many.
I know there are fields and
fields
baseball
and circles
and
yeah.
Yeah.
Someday a statue, I assume, maybe a bronze.
Right, maybe so.
Yeah.
Also, you have a
my daughter graduated from UTA, and she's doing graduate work here.
Uh-huh.
And my wife has worked for UTA for on and on, in certain situations for 15 years or so. So
wow. So you really do have a
UTA
connection. Yeah. Even in spite of not having graduated from here, you have quite a connection.
Some of the graduate work I did here did apply to my MA, which I got from the University of Dallas.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was going to ask you about that, and so your MA was in what?
American Studies.
Okay. And was that related then to your archives work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
At the National Archive?
A little reinforcement.
I see. Okay. And why did you choose that route? Why did you choose to go into archives and that line of study?
You mean, well, when I left my manufacturing business in Fort Worth, being a history and politics grad, I was interested in archives.
Okay.
I was interested in what that represented, and the historical value. And I was hired by NARA as a researcher early. And I ended up in the director situation. I was assistant director for a time until I retired. So,
okay.
So I was 15 years at NARA.
My goodness. That's a good career.
Yeah.
So we mentioned that you were drafted into the Army, and you were selected to be a chaplain's assistant,
a citizen soldier,
a citizen soldier, right? And you were they're selected to be a chaplain's assistant.
Yeah, I think they. I don't know if that's something you can apply for. They offered it to us, and after basic training, we were sent to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and that was advanced infantry, and you're still an infantryman.
Right. Okay.
Advanced infantry, weapons, and admin training. There was a lot of admin training that you had to qualify for. From Fort Dix, we were actually sent to Fort Hamilton, New York, which is right in Brooklyn on the Verrazano Narrows, just the east side of the East River, across from the East Village, which was an attraction too.
Sure.
So that was another 4 or 5 weeks. I reported originally for basic training in May. I did not deploy until mid-October.
Okay.
And of course, my orders were Vietnam.
Sure. And that's quite a lengthy
A lot of training
for an enlisted guy.
For an enlisted guy.
Yeah.
By the way, that's where we had weekends off when we were in New York.
Uh-huh.
And I would go to the East Village, still doing the coffee shops,
Right.
And that's where I was at a hotel in East Village. That's where I saw the moon landing on TV.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. What was your impression of that?
Oh, I thought it was terrific. I was becoming a patriot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. I guess.
Well, all that time in Chicago in the 60s, I was political.
How so?
I used to go to the meetings. I'm not going to name any associations, but
Sure.
Everyone was political.
Mm-hmm.
You think they're political now. They were political then in the 60s. In 1968, they had the Democrat convention in Chicago, and that was a real brouhaha.
Right.
Right at that time, I went to Canada. My grandfather was a Canadian.
Oh, okay.
I went to Canada, and we did some touring and some job interviews in Canada. I was kind of mixed about my situation with the draft.
Sure.
In the long run, you're loyal, you have responsibility, you have family pride,
Right.
and you're happy to be an American.
Right. In 1968, the Democrat convention, that was the police riot of 1968 is what they called that.
His Honor, Mayor Daley.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Along those same lines, this is
pre-war.
This is out of left field a little bit.
Yeah.
Your involvement politically. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated that year. Martin Luther King was assassinated that year.
It was quite a year. Yeah.
It was a very, very difficult year for the country.
And then we got landslide Lyndon as president.
Right.
And the bombing began.
Right.
Okay. But there was a lot of anti-war sentiment, especially inside the universities in Chicago.
Right.
University of Chicago, Northwestern,
Right.
DePaul, Loyola.
Yeah, Chicago 7 and all that.
Yeah.
Right. That's an
Quite a
interesting
time.
place and it's an interesting place to be from during that time because that's kind of the center of
Sure.
the protest movement, if you will, of the Vietnam War is Chicago.
It was, yeah.
So that's very interesting. And so then you said you began to become a patriot. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, that was basically a family thing. We have a large family that all served. We served. If you were alive and breathing in Chicago in those days, and you were a college student, you were basically anti-war. So you were you were anti-war for the Vietnam fiasco. And the politics were hot and heavy.
Yeah.
So I went to a couple of meetings and dragged some people with me.
Right. And then, so as you, like I said, as you went through training, et cetera, those attitudes changed, and was it only because of family that those attitudes changed, or?
No, you go through a little psychological thing too. Um, in basic training, I'm 23 years old,
Right.
and I'm there with a bunch of teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And I eventually clicked with me that do what you can do your best. And so I thought I excelled.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to do it right.
Right. Very good.
So
you were after your training. So in October of what year you were sent to Vietnam?
I was sent to Vietnam in October of 1969.
Right. So still a very hot time in Vietnam.
Yeah. They were about 6 months after that. There was a concerted effort toward Vietnamization of the war.
Right.
And we became quite military in the year 1970. Early in that year,
Mm-hmm.
we started saluting again, and guard mount, and just because you're a chaplain's assistant doesn't mean you don't do the sweeps and the guard duty.
Right.
And another thing I caught on very kind of early was supernumerary at guard mount. Vietnam is hot, and most of the time it's wet.
Yes.
And being in a bunker or a guard tower is not the most pleasant way to spend an evening.
Uh-huh.
We did have a supernumerary effect where you knew your chain of command, you knew your weapons, you knew your drill, you had the sharpest starched uniform, the shiniest equipment, the cleanest rifle. That's another thing. I trained on an M14 all that time in infantry training. When I got to Vietnam, they handed me an M16.
Right.
Which was took me a while, but I became an expert.
Yeah.
So the supernumerary was chosen every guard mount, and if you were chosen for guard mount, you certainly wanted to appear prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And the super prepared person usually handled the radio back at headquarters, and of course if anyone got injured or wounded or sick, you were the replacement, but you didn't have to initially.
I see.
Go out in the truck and take your station.
And so your goal was to be
My
squared
goal was,
away at all
and
times.
I was every time.
Every time.
Of course, I had some competition, but
of course.
Yeah.
Before you went to Vietnam, did you receive any language or cultural training?
Oh yeah, we had counseling. At Fort Hamilton, we had I think it was a 4 or 5 week training of not only military funerals, I think even marriages, burials.
Interesting.
But there was counseling and some bereavement training.
Mm-hmm. When you say counseling, you're talking about counseling training, as in your duties as a chaplain's assistant?
Chaplain's assistant. The primary duty is to take care of the chaplain.
Right.
They're almost like a man at arms, for the chaplain.
Right.
Some of the chaplains could handle themselves very well.
Uh-huh.
Some of them were theology first and military second.
I see.
But there was they ran the gamut. Some of them could protect themselves very well. Some refused to bear arms at all. So
I see. So your secondary duty then would be kind of like an assistant chaplain in counseling or bereavement, dealing with some of those issues with other soldiers?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Except, when I landed at Da Nang, we took a C-1, I think, transport. You know what that means? Well, we left Oakland on Flying Tiger. Airlines. We stopped in Honolulu, Wake Island,
Oh, wow.
which is an airstrip and a custard stand.
Hmm.
Then to Manila before getting to Da Nang. Then from Da Nang to my station, which was Quy Nhon.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the people I trained with at Fort Hamilton were part of this.
Okay.
So this small group, many, not all.
Uh-huh.
Some went to Europe, some stayed stateside.
You're referring to chaplain's assistants?
Chaplain's
here?
assistants,
Okay.
yeah.
How many of them were in your group?
Probably about 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I can't really remember how many there were.
Mm-hmm.
Enough to fill a typical classroom.
You sure?
We got to Da Nang, and we took the transport to Quy Nhon, which is 2 Corps, they called it, which is Central Highlands, Vietnam. And we were sent to Camp Granite. There were a couple of, camps in. There was a big complex in Quy Nhon. It was a big base. There was an evac hospital there, and I was assigned to First Logistics. And I think that was the largest single entity in Vietnam. First Logistics, you can imagine all of the ports, air transport, transportation companies, services, quartermaster. Those all fell into that category for First Logistics. So we were sent to Camp Granite. We reported to our lieutenant colonel, who was a man named John Russell. He was a priest, Catholic priest, and he was very efficient and a good soldier. He impressed me. I was sent there with another guy from Chicago. He was a teacher, and he also participated in a family business in Chicago. And we were both interviewed. I imagine separately, but when we interviewed together, he asked this other fella, where would you rather serve? Would you rather serve in the bush or would you rather serve at headquarters? And he said, headquarters. And I said, it really doesn't matter to me because I was becoming pretty much detached from this. So, of course, he did the opposite. I ended up in headquarters and this other guy went to the bush.
Right. So
that's how that works.
Yeah, that's the Army.
Yeah, that is the Army. Don't protest too much. So what was that other part of that question?
Cultural training or
language training. We were taught to respect the culture.
Sure.
And we participated a little bit with the Vietnamese. I had the opportunity, probably a little bit because of my background, to do some volunteer work at Quy Hoa Leprosarium, which was a hospital and community service operation run by French Franciscan nuns. And it was actually a hospital for leprosy.
Wow.
So, but the families there, they had children that need to be educated. So, with my high school, a lot of the students in Vietnam had a little experience with French. So my high school French and they're in English and they're a little bit of French. I was able to do some basic vocabulary. And a lot of these kids were very interested in Western culture.
See?
So they had a lot of questions about that.
So these were children of patients?
They were high school, basically, and wards of the convent.
I see.
And I think this was a program that the chaplaincy, area chaplaincy, was a program that they did in collaboration with Winning the Hearts and Minds, and the program of accepting surrender by NVA and Viet Cong, members. So, and one of the tales is that Charlie stood his ground apart from the possibility of contracting leprosy.
I see.
So they were, but they were great. The convent, the nuns and the administrators were very good and very grateful to us, for helping out.
How many patients were in this facility, and do you have any idea?
Never really saw a lot of them. A lot of them were in the wards.
I see.
It was quite a complex, though. I'm assuming hundreds, in the hundreds.
Wow. So leprosy was that prominent even at that time.
Tough to contract, but no cure.
Right. Wow. And so you said you did that as volunteer work.
Well, as far as you can volunteer.
Sure, in the Army.
Yeah. It was just suggested I do it.
Right.
Yeah, so...
So when you were there, when you were in Vietnam, were you assigned one chaplain? Or were you assigned?
No.
Tell me about that a little bit.
In my case, being in headquarters there, I ran the non-appropriated fund as well, and I did purchasing.
Okay.
And I had an obligation to the camp CO to do my share of guard duty, sweeps, H&I fire, and other duties. I filled as many sandbags as anybody did.
Right.
So,
but
you would be assigned
boots while you were doing it.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't shine rubber boots, but they could shine that brass.
Right.
So I did their publications and their correspondence, and there was quite a bit of that. There were a lot of, and I handled that for basically that chapter of the chaplaincy.
Okay.
Whoever reported to the commanding chaplain. So there were, so I got to travel to the LZs. Not something you really want to do, but
right.
Saigon, Pleiku, and had some interesting sightseeing to do in Saigon.
Oh,
yeah. Matter of fact, there was an instance when I was in Saigon at a conference, and I had nothing to do, but from Long Bin to Saigon is like a short commute. The chaplain that I was supporting in that particular conference had a staff car. And when he was in the conferences, which was all day, the driver and I had nothing to do. So we took the staff car back to Long Bin to visit a guard company that a member of whom was a guy I went to high school with.
Oh, okay.
And I later found out his job was he was the lifeguard at the Officers Club pool.
I see.
I'm sure he had other duties, but that's the one he talked about. But when I went to their commanding officer and asked for this guy by name, I was accused of being CID, which is criminal investigation. I had no insignia. I had a staff car and driver, and I was a Spec 4,
right,
Specialist 4, tech, which is a great cover, I suppose, if you wanted to use it.
Yeah.
And they actually hid this guy from me in the barracks.
Did you ever get to see it?
Yes, eventually. They bought my story eventually that I was just another chaplain's assistant on duty, temporary duty. So we got to see. So we got, we had a couple of beers and
that's good.
And reminisced about high school.
Sure, that's great.
That was good.
So did you regularly travel with the chaplains?
Yeah, the landing zones and services, in the field.
Okay.
Plus, I had to look after him
Right.
There were only hymns. Look after them.
Yeah, at that time, yeah, I'm sure that's true.
Some of them didn't need any looking after.
Right.
The sidearms,
Yeah. Interesting.
bandoliers, sidearms.
Chaplain.
And some of them needed a lot of
Okay.
attention.
Okay.
So protection.
Somehow I don't visualize chaplains with bandoliers and pistols on their hips, and
It all depended on where they went. There was some integrated activity with the Australians and the South Korean, the ROCs, the South Koreans.
Yeah.
And the South Korean, I think they were the Tigers, the Tiger Division.
Yes.
The Vietnamese, the regular NVA and Victor Charlie both gave them a wide berth.
Right.
I think it's because of the way they handled the prisoners.
I've heard stories.
Yeah. Whereas we were more, congenial with prisoners.
Certainly, comparatively speaking.
Yeah.
Um,
So I got to a few landing zones and fire bases. But the beauty of that was, of course, in my case, was I was in for a few hours at a time. Very rarely spent a night.
I see.
And out again. Usually UH-1s.
Uh-huh. And then back to headquarters.
And then back to Camp Granite.
Yeah. See, now the chaplains that you supported, were they one specific denomination, like Catholics?
No.
Or you supported
No.
all faiths?
Yeah. Jewish.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the Protestant denominations.
Sure.
Catholics.
Mm-hmm. That's
there were a substantial amount of the population in South Vietnam was Catholic. Not
yes.
When I say substantial, I mean maybe 10%.
Right.
When the demarcation was established, a lot of refugees from the north that were Catholic went south.
I see. Okay.
So I helped a Vietnamese priest by the name of Paul Cack, and he was a collaborator with the U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm.
He helped with interpreter situations, and he performed a lot of masses at the camps for the GIs.
Okay. And he was Vietnamese?
He was Vietnamese, yeah.
Did you see or participate in any combat situations while you were there?
Well, typically not. I witnessed it. Of course, the camp would get hit periodically. Mm-hmm. The sappers would blow the gates, or once in a while we'd catch a mortar round or two. Harassment and interdictment fire,
right.
Against the side of a mountain, hoping to draw fire, I suppose.
Right.
There were stories about sensors on the mountain, uric acid or something.
Okay.
And I think most of the time they tracked animals. So I don't think that was very effective.
Right.
An interesting sidelight was at one time I was at that duty. This isn't the first time this happened, but I was doing H&I fire from a bunker, and my mother called.
Tell me about that.
She had a career with New England Telephone and Telegraph Company.
Right.
And I don't, there weren't satellites. I think Telstar went up in 1967, but that was AT&T.
Right.
But there was a system called Mars.
Yes, heard of it.
Military adjunct something, telegraphy, which was supported by private radio, ham radio operators.
Right.
And so there were relays, and she, from her experience, she was at Fort. What was the name of that fort in Evanston, Illinois? She was there, and she patched through
Uh-huh.
and got me on the field phone
Right.
in Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And
what do you say?
yeah, in the midst of your
Hello, Ma.
yeah,
Yeah, everything's fine.
yeah, excuse the mortar fire,
Yes,
Mom?
I got the package. The cheesecake, I think, was a little moldy, but but the baked beans came through.
Right. That's
Yeah, that was
surreal.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's
not every GI got that experience.
no, no.
And when and the field phone operator would say, "Smith, it's your mother. Smith, gonna take this?"
That's great. Oh,
Embarrassing, but
well,
but
yeah.
heartwarming at the same time.
Well, sure. Mom was concerned about you. That is heartwarming.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it is. I could only imagine what that would be like.
Imagine how the other people felt.
Yeah, they were probably a little
Jealousy.
Mixed. Yeah, jealousy
Sure.
on one side, maybe.
Amazement first.
Yes. Hilarity ensued.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. I bet you took
There were a few jokes later.
Yeah, I'm sure there were. Did you lose anyone close to you while you were there?
Well, there was a pilot, a Huey pilot that shuffled us around quite a bit. He had a terrible accident and burned up on the ground. They fly in formation
Sure.
occasionally, and one of the choppers got hit and veered into his vehicle, and he burned up. We saw what was left of that.
Oh, wow.
When the UH-1s burn, they burn quickly.
Yeah. Wow.
They burn fiercely, so there's no escape.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a loss. That was like an acquaintance of mine.
Sure.
But not too much.
Not intimate friends, but
No, we weren't really in any major mission operations.
Would you say that you avoided intimate friendships while you were there?
You make some pretty fast friends, no matter. There were when I was discharged early because I extended my tour.
Okay.
I was in country probably a little less than 14 months.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more than the normal tour.
Right.
But at that time, the Army, to save resources and cash, it wasn't worth it to reassign me. They put me in a reserve unit out of St. Louis when I returned to Chicago.
Okay.
Which never called me for duty. Never, not
Really?
once. Never heard from them. But those few people that I knew, it was like 2 or 3 guys who were pretty close. They came to my wedding in Chicago. Oh, actually, it was in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I was married in 1973.
I see.
And they had been discharged.
Uh-huh.
They came to my wedding, so they were pretty. We stayed in touch a little bit, but it fades.
Right.
Those things fade away.
Sure. And friendships have the tendency to do that sometimes. And
Yeah, things happen in your life.
and you answered the next question. Were you in a relationship when you served, or married? Or
No,
in a relationship?
no, I wasn't.
You were not.
No.
Yeah. So once again, hilarity ensues as I ask the question: how did you communicate with your loved ones? Well,
that was
you
one
talked
way,
to-
telephonically.
Yeah. Right. Which is
the,
unusual.
The other way was, of course, letters.
Yeah.
And people talk about redaction of our mail, APO, San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
But no one ever really said anything about that in my family.
Mm-hmm.
I got a lot of packages. I got,
Mm-hmm.
and I sent slides. I was a fanatic Pentax 35 SLR
Right.
photographer. So I sent a lot of slides to my
Uh-huh.
father, and he sent a lot of people I work with. I had a job. I was employed before I was drafted.
Uh-huh.
Not teaching. I only did a little bit of shadowing
Right.
before. I never really. I mean, I had the job, but I never really was assigned.
Right.
Did a little teaching in something I used to call social studies
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
civics.
Right.
But yeah, we had regular communication, photographs, letters, and cassette tapes. That was hot.
Oh, yeah.
Sound, audio.
You sent
Did
tapes
some of
back
that.
home. Mm-hmm.
Did some
Yeah.
of that. And of course, I tried to be as dramatic as I could be.
Sure.
Not to excite anybody's sense of danger, of course,
Right.
but there was a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it sounds like there was. Um, how did you deal with stress while you were there?
I think I felt as if I was basically participating in this tour of duty as a witness to what was going on. I didn't feel like I was really a participant. I know I did all the activity and the actual participation, but I felt like I was a little bit detached from this.
Hmm.
It was this was another me.
Yeah.
They kept me very busy, so
Uh-huh.
um,
Not a lot of time to ponder.
I really looked forward to that, what they called R&R.
Yes.
That was a relief.
Yes.
I
And
got
where did you go?
I went to Sydney.
Oh.
I flew to, I think, from Manila to Sydney, and I stayed. I was, I arranged. You can arrange this. It's almost like a travel service. I arranged a cabana on Bondi Beach.
Hmm.
So I stayed on the beach,
Right.
and that's the first time I saw Hair. It was in Sydney, and in King's Cross, in a theater in King's Cross.
Is that right?
Hair was a hot
musical.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I didn't want to go back, but technically I was AWOL because we had aircraft problems in a place called Darwin, Australia, which is just a mud flat.
Oh, I see. Okay.
A hot, steamy mud flat in the north of Australia.
You say.
So I got back a little late.
You say we. Who was with you?
Whoever's on the plane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all had the same dates.
Okay.
There's a whole industry for GIs in the 60s and from Vietnam. Wherever you went, there's a cottage industry that caters to GIs.
Okay. Okay.
Bargains.
Yeah.
Galore.
Yeah. I'm sure.
No one really wanted to see you, but there was money to be had.
Right. Right. Yeah. They'll take the money if they'll look at you if you've got money. Yeah, I've got you. What kind of challenges did you or your family face with your being away from home like that?
Well, the anxiety, close-knit family. My brother, who was an MP, he was pretty concerned. Both of my brothers were concerned because I was kind of vital to the business.
Oh, the family business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just getting going.
I see.
In the early 60s, while I was in school. During high school, I used to work in Chicago in the summer.
Yeah.
It wasn't a lot of fun, but we were just getting our business together.
Right.
Clientele, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
So, and they're still in business today.
Still blowing and going today. What year did you leave the military?
I was discharged in November of 1970.
And is that when you went to St. Louis as a reservist, or you?
No, I never went to St. Louis.
Okay. Oh, you were just assigned
Right.
to that.
I was
You-
assigned. That was my reporting station.
I get.
But I was told, don't do anything until you hear from them.
Right. So it's an inactive reserve status kind of.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I was discharged in November, and I was given in November.
Mhm.
Right. November in Vietnam is still pretty warm.
Mm.
You know, it's above the equator.
Right.
But I was when I left Oakland, I was given gloves and earmuffs and a parka to go to Vietnam. That was winter gear.
Right.
When I was sent back to the States, I was in khakis.
Uh-huh.
You know, the casual khakis.
Sure.
They took most of my combat equipment and uniforms away, and they gave me and I had a set of khakis, and I landed in SeaTac and duffel bag,
Uh-huh.
and discharged from there.
Uh-huh.
And I guess you're paid, and then you go standby. And to get back to Chicago, I had to go from SeaTac to Seattle Tacoma.
Right.
In khakis and a blanket that I took from the barracks.
Mm.
So I went from Seattle to Denver
Mhm.
to St. Louis to Chicago, all standby. So there's a lot of time at the airport.
Right.
And I didn't get a heartfelt welcome home
No,
at those stops.
you didn't.
No.
Yeah. Nobody loving you and sweet old ladies saying thank you for your
There were
service.
no rallies at the airport gate
No,
for
any
us folks.
flag waivers or anything
No.
like that.
No.
Did anybody shout at you or call you baby killer or spit on
Mostly
you?
the silent treatment, and
Okay.
if you sat at the gate for the seating arrangements at the gate, you'd have a wide berth.
I see. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So in total, how long did you serve?
This is quite the total probably less than 19 months
Okay.
overall.
Okay.
So
not
a
the-
quick in and out.
Yeah,
as
so
they-
not the full 2 years that
No.
you expected.
No.
Right.
They had that program that.
Right.
Ironically, I was awarded the Bronze Star for my activities.
You anticipated my next question,
Oh,
and that's a
but for that period of time,
right. So it's a Bronze Star for service. Is
service in the face of hostile forces.
very good.
Yeah.
Any other medals or citations that
The theater awards that
Sure.
the Vietnam campaign awards. You get those.
Any specific experiences that you recall? Anything that made you laugh? Lots of things.
Well, we did a lot of barbecue.
Oh,
Yeah. There was some incidents with the supplies. There was something called a military payment certificate that the enlisted men and the officers, I suppose, they were issued monthly as their monthly pay.
okay.
They were small colored bills that represented values of 5 cents up to maybe $10, right?
Mhm.
And the GIs would spend these whenever things were not off limits. They'd spend them in the city of Quin Yon and the suburbs,
Okay.
and the local merchants would accept them.
Oh.
They were not easily. They were used. They were used as exchange on the base. At the PXs, at the EM clubs, at the officers' clubs.
Mm-hmm.
and every once in a while they would do a reissue, and if this would be without notice. There would be no more blue money. There would only be green money after this.
I see.
And so no one could speculate
Right.
on. And the funny thing, I guess it was funny, would be the local merchants would stand at the chain link fences, throwing these worthless military payment certificates over the fence at us and cursing us, of course,
Sure.
in whatever English they knew.
Right. Or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that so they did that every once in a while, so that there would be, no arbitrage.
I see. And
I did run the Quignon area chaplain's non-appropriated fund.
mhm.
So I got the best exchange rates for them on
I
these
see.
things. I think
Okay.
that helped.
Oh, well, that's good.
But that was, I don't know if it was funny or tragic comedy, where
yeah.
now all of their MPCs were worthless.
Yeah. Yeah. Tragic and
Tragic
comedic.
comedy.
Tragic in the sense that they lost all that money, but comedic in the sense that they
They
were
were getting something for nothing, you mean?
and they were
Yeah.
throwing things at you.
And they were throwing these balled up wads of
Right.
currency back over at us, hoping for what, I don't know.
I don't know, but I hope you learned your lesson.
But I understood they did that annually, but you never knew when. Annually, maybe semi-annually.
Right. What was your rank when you left the service?
Specialist 4.
Okay.
I was a E1, then a private first class, and then you get it. If you're not, pretty sure they still use that echelon specialist.
Uh-huh.
I think they still use
think
that
so.
in the enlisted ranks.
Yeah.
That was a non-command,
Mm-hmm.
a non-command ranking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you weren't going to be, I guess it was equivalent of maybe a corporal, possibly.
Mm-hmm. E4.
E4.
I guess so.
E4.
Did you experience any discrimination while you served? Discrimination for your religion, for instance?
No, not for my religion, but when I was drafted in boot camp, is it possible to be a non-aggressive, non-combatant type? I wasn't in full participation with the Army
Gotcha.
culture to begin with,
Yes.
and I paid for that quite a bit with peeling potatoes
I see.
and cleaning latrines
Yes.
and doing a lot of running
Yes.
and a lot of dry shaving.
Yeah.
But I quickly mended my ways.
I see. But that's interesting because oftentimes we think of discrimination in terms of race or religion or national origin or sexual orientation, whatever. And yours was not based on any of those things.
Maybe politics, possibly.
Right.
Possibly.
Right.
In Vietnam, the incarceration for Black American soldiers was a lot higher than it was for non-Black.
Mm.
They used to say that Long Binh Jail, which is nicknamed LBJ, had a higher population than any domestic penal institution
Really?
at one time.
Wow.
I don't know if that was when I was serving. But
Now that's at the height of the
Yeah.
civil rights movement and the
Exactly.
heights.
Yeah.
Well, even beyond civil rights, we're talking now more militant branches of the civil rights movement.
But not being on a line unit, not being involved in a line unit, I probably didn't see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the problems that might have existed then.
Mhm.
I'm sure there were. They used to call me Pops when I was 23 years old,
Because
and
you
I
were
was a bunch of teenagers,
Right.
teenage soldiers.
So they're draftees. The other draftees were
The other
18
draftees
years
were,
old,
yeah.
or whatever. And
Well,
you're
some of them were
23.
RA.
Yeah.
RA, regular Army. They
Oh,
weren't all
okay.
draftees.
Okay. Okay. You trained. So you trained with regular Army.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So they were volunteers then.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. And pretty gung ho at first.
Yeah, gung ho. That was part of my problem.
Yeah.
Um, you can't be. You had to be aggressive. So.
Yeah.
So I learned to be pretty aggressive.
Sure.
Used to fight with pugil sticks, and I was an expert with the bayonet after a while,
Oh wow.
and the grenade.
Uh-huh.
You'd be surprised how far you can throw a grenade when it's live.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Substantial distance.
I didn't have a lot of experience in that, but I can imagine that it would be. Yeah. You might do better than you think you could.
Yeah.
Was there anyone you served with who influenced you in a significant way?
Well, yeah. The chaplain's commander.
Yeah.
This guy John Russell. He was a pretty impressive character.
Yeah.
Very virtuous.
Oh.
But down to earth. But us sarcastic people, we make fun of virtues, and you shouldn't do that.
Sure.
We learn eventually that
Right.
virtuosity is desirable.
Right.
Man of strong virtue. This Vietnamese priest that I worked with,
Yes.
Paul Cack,
Yeah.
I thought for sure he would not make it after 75,
Oh.
1975.
Yeah.
I thought for sure he would be at least subject to re-education,
Right.
if not worse, termination. But I read somewhere that he became a bishop, and
Oh my.
so somehow or other he had some kind of immunity for this. After all the collaboration and all the
Right.
support.
Right.
So that was heartening to hear.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, a few people.
What makes you think about your service? What makes you recall your service? Are there sights or sounds or smells or music? Anything like that?
Really, surprisingly, well, maybe not surprisingly, but no one really asked me that much about it. I had a few stories that I'd tell my kids.
Sure.
But I think under the surface, I think they were proud that I served, that I was a veteran.
Sure.
But nothing like this. I went to a few veterans group meetings,
Uh-huh.
and it seemed as if they've never got above the fray. They were still using that language,
Uh-huh.
Still raucous people,
Okay.
even as old as we were.
Sure.
They were still, they still had that mental attitude.
Uh-huh.
That
Interesting. Yeah.
some of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there were some serious presentations about charities and
Mm-hmm.
support veterans groups, support disabled veterans groups, and there's a little pocket of guys there that are still,
Right.
that age group.
Yeah. Even when they're not.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
and I guess
interesting.
that's does it change you?
Yeah.
Does being in a war change you? Everything you do changes you in one way or another, for good or bad. They were still had that. I don't know how they were. They members of a veterans group
Right.
that coalesced to
Uh-huh.
with that attitude or not. Then there are the people that are tragically affected by the war.
Yes.
It was a heck of an experience, I'll tell you.
Yes.
But like we discussed once, that all these things, didn't change you, for the worse.
Mm-hmm.
Everything changes you. Going to junior high school gives you a
Sure.
different attitude.
Sure, right.
Everything changes you.
Yeah.
But I wasn't a victim because I was drafted and sent to a hostile theater of war.
But now, do you, getting back to that question, do you hear the animals? We've got to get out of this place.
Oh, that was one of our themes. Yeah, we got to get out of this place.
Fortunate Son, or something like that, and you takes you back.
It was putting an X on a calendar.
Okay.
An X on the day on a calendar. There were people that did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm short.
Yeah.
I'm short. And
so it's, for you, it's just...
the volunteer army. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? The volunteer army. How effective is the citizen soldier is something we aspire to.
Yes.
But a volunteer army without a goal is a tough thing to handle, a tough thing to manage.
Yeah.
Or a conscripted army.
Yes.
A citizen army without concrete goals. And, we had good organization and we never lost a battle.
Right. Right.
But the outcome of that war was questionable.
Right. I think that's very true. Tell me again, we started with this in the very beginning. We kind of got ahead of ourselves a bit, but what did you do after you left the military? You mentioned
well, I had a job.
Yeah, you had you got married.
I got married. Yeah, I went back to my job. I met my wife at a garden party at a lake. There was a house on a lake, and I met her. I met a girl in a chartreuse bikini, and then I was thunderstruck.
Yes.
So I was working and playing golf and.
And what was your family business?
We were in polymers and basically supplying lithography. The lithography business. It was big in Chicago.
Okay.
Printing is not as big as it used to be.
Right.
The newspapers, the periodicals, advertising. There was a lot of printing in the Milwaukee, Chicago area in that time. So we eventually we branched out to Fort Worth. So I had a manufacturing plant in Fort Worth, Texas.
I see. Okay. Is that how you ended up here?
That's how I got. Yeah.
Okay.
That was 40 years ago.
Right. And you ultimately left the family business?
Yeah. Yeah.
And why did you choose to do that?
Well, there were some deaths. A couple of my brothers died.
Oh. Okay, I'm sorry.
And we were consolidating manufacturing for standardization, and I wanted to do something else. So
sure,
that's when I got into archivy.
Right. And so, how did you just said just an interest in history, and that's what led you?
I graduated in history from Loyola. But in those days, you had, there were certain course elements that you were required. And I was in something called pre-law.
Right. Okay.
So that's what they called it then. It was,
right.
Ethics and philosophy, politics, political science, languages, history, economics, that kind of stuff. So I probably would have gone to law school if I wasn't.
Oh.
I probably would have gone to law school in Chicago, as a matter of fact. When I was subject to induction, conscription, I had a brother-in-law who was a lawyer in Boston. He pulled some strings. trying to get me into the Massachusetts National Guard.
Ah,
And I think he succeeded. And then I said, never mind. I'm just
right,
going to face the music.
right.
You know, we were talking a lot about the draft.
Yeah,
The draft was very heavy
yeah,
on the back of college students
yeah.
and even high school students
Right.
in the 60s. So it was it was, if you talk about oppression,
Yeah, I can't
that was
imagine.
very oppressive.
Right.
So you had to either, you had to deal with it.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's this big, what did you call it, a scimitar? Hanging
yeah, over your head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The scimitar of the
the
draft.
the hanging sword
Yes, yeah.
of Damocles.
Damocles. um, if you could do it all over again,
Get drafted.
well, okay, but things being the same, circumstances being the
You
same,
know,
would you do it the same way that you did it? Would you, or would you say, well, I'm going to go the 4 so I can be an officer, and would
well,
you change anything?
you know what Hegel says. So you're the product of your history. You're a product of history, right?
Yes, yes,
Being an historian,
yes.
you know that.
I've read Hegel.
You can't go home again. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Now I'm jumping up into the hip generation.
right.
You had the hip generation, the Beats,
Right.
and then the hippies came from there, and the yippies
Mm-hmm.
came from there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where they are now. You can't go back. You can't say, would I do this over again? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would serve if I were called.
Okay. That's a reasonable answer. Yeah.
In any time of my life now, I would serve when called. I would serve now if called.
Right. Very good. How often do you come onto campus and amaze yourself with all the growth and
It's
changes?
amazing the cash
Yeah.
that the universities have accumulated over the decades now,
Yeah.
and the expansion.
Yes.
I'm not really sure about the demographics of UTA now, but are they talking about 40,000 plus enrollment, maybe more? If you
Maybe.
Yeah.
Lots of international students, particularly because of the engineering school and the nursing school.
the nursing school, outstanding.
Yeah. It's both outstanding. Social work department, social
I'm a
work.
big fan of the Movin' Mavs basketball program,
Oh.
so I like to take those games in. And what they've made,
Great.
and that field house is outstanding.
Yeah. What advice do you have for young people who are entering the military today, or do you have any advice for young people who are entering the military today?
Well, now of course now it's all voluntary,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's a lot of politics in the military now.
Yeah.
There are some social movements going on in the
Mhm.
military,
Mm-hmm.
for good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
If a high school graduate or even a college graduate, if they have some kind of direction crisis,
Yes.
I might even recommend enlisting,
I think that's a good way to put it. A direction crisis. Yeah.
because of the discipline.
Mm-hmm.
I think there should be a lot more volunteers than there are.
Yes.
The opportunity to find yourself in a discipline, self-discipline,
Mm-hmm.
self-motivation, self-industry,
Yeah.
personal
Mm-hmm.
personal gain, personal skills.
Yeah.
I think I think it's outstanding.
Mm-hmm. Helps you find out who you are and what you can endure.
Whatever you study in undergraduate school, what are the chances you're going to be in that discipline? Unless you go on
Right.
and really you're an academic.
Right.
The the chances you're going to end up functional as a productive employee somewhere in that discipline are pretty slight.
Right.
So, you have plenty of time. I mean, 4 years in the military is not going to just going to make, it's going to build your character.
It's the blink of an eye.
It is.
When you
4
get
years
to our
is,
age. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything you would like to add to this interview that I have not covered?
Boy, you're pretty exhaustive in your questioning. There's a lot of little adventures that we have, but we covered quite a bit of stuff here. There's some heartbreak in there. There's some fear, especially when you're first in country in Vietnam.
Yeah.
There's some. You're a newbie.
Yeah.
You're a cherry when you first get there.
Oh, is that right?
You're a cherry.
I see.
And so you're warned, that.
I'm not sure I want to know what that means.
Yeah. I think the first 3 months you're there, you're in dangerous waters.
Right.
And maybe the last few weeks you're there, you're in danger.
Yes. Yes.
And you're trying to avoid all possible scrapes.
Right.
And dust ups. But there's a lot, I think we covered it pretty good. I think so.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When I'd heard your story secondhand from your daughter, I was blown away and just excited to hear what you had to say, because your story is unique and it's going to make a wonderful addition to our project. So I thank you.
I have high hopes for you, Joe.
Well, thank you very much. And I will try not to disappoint you. And,
all right. Get out the editing knife.
That's there'll be a little of that.
Okay. Sir.
Mostly it's on me. But again, I thank you for your service. Thank you for your time and giving me the opportunity to interview you.
Hoo-ah.
Thank you.